Welcome to another Plotter post-processing tutorial. My name is Eric, and today we're going to cover how to use the deCompose application. deCompose has gone through an entire rewrite, essentially, of how it works. So this is going to be replacing an older video that I already recorded. We're going to open up wherever we downloaded our Plotter post-processing application. If you need help installing that, check out my installation video. We're going to open this up in the terminal. And we are going to, I'm going to use this file over here. I'm going to show you how you can pull this red shape off of this design and separate it out to separate layers. So I'm just going to save this as an SVG into my downloads folder. I'm going to open up the terminal and say Python main application.py. And in here, I'm going to open up the design that I just downloaded. So we are right now on Plotter post-processing version 1.3.0. This will certainly increment in the future, but this is the version I'm on right now. You can see that in the header here. You can see that printed out here. And I'm going to just open up the deCompose app. So deCompose has undergone some changes. It may, at first blush, seem like there's a lot of redundant stuff going on here, but it's all for a very good reason. In the previous iteration of deCompose, you would have to do one of possibly 3 operations. And if you wanted to do more than one, you would have to essentially run it once, reopen it, and run it for the other thing that you wanted to do. And now you can just do any number of operations just in series. So each of these kind of segments is a separate portion, and we will delete and reinterpret files as necessary to accomplish all of the tasks. So what we're going to do first is we're just going to show it as it is. And you can see, as usual, that the vpipe pipeline string shows up in our terminal window here. So this is a good kind of debug reference if you want to look at that. And you can see that we have, just like in our design here, got these 2 shapes. vpipe doesn't show the filled in portion because plotters don't care about fill. But you can see that we've got 2 layers here, and this is being parsed by stroke. So the stroke color is giving us 2 different layers. And the first item that is at the top of your SVG is going to be put into layer 1, which should be our black stroke layer. So if I click layer 1 here in the layer menu, it'll go away. And if I click 2, the red will go away. So red is layer 2. So let's say we wanted to remove just layer 2. Previously, there was a series of checkboxes depending on your layers, and now there's just an input box here for removing layers. So if I have, and this can take a mix of kind of comma separated or dashes to indicate kind of a range of values. So in this case, I'm just going to say, let's do remove layer 2. Let's show that output. And there it is. You can see that the red has been removed and we just have the black left over. There's only 1 layer in this design. So that's how you just remove a layer. I'm just going to confirm that, and we can take that output, which you can see here, is now our input. So the _DEC stands for deCompose. This will not overwrite the original file. The original file is still there. If I go to my downloads folder, you can see I've got the original one here, and then you've got the decomposed version on top of that. And so, as with all other applications, Plotter post-processing takes the output of the previous step as its new input. So we don't have to reselect any files right now, and I'm just going to hop right back into deCompose. So what else can you do in deCompose? One thing you can do is you can separate a design into different layers. So for instance, if you wanted to separate it based on drawing distance, you would check this box, separate into n layers, where n, the default is 2, but we can change this to be whatever we want. And then by distance, so it's going to read it in as a single layer file, no matter what. And then it's going to split the distance, and in this case is by 4 inches. So let's just go ahead and see what that looks like. So basically what's happening here is it's starting and drawing these circles, these concentric rings. And as soon as it draws 4 inches worth of green, it's going to switch over to this pink color and do 4 inches of that. And so as you kind of move out, you see that each one is getting to be, fewer and fewer rings because we're traveling further distances. Now, the way that split works, or rather split distance works in this, is that it will complete the line that it's on. So even these outer ones here, and it's a little hard to kind of trace them around, but this outer line here, it's going to do this entire ring before it changes to the next layer, because split distance won't split up a line by default. To do that, we would want to make sure we check this split all, where it takes and it checks each vertice along a line to see if it's gone beyond the 4 inches, and then it will break and show, or it'll break and go to the next color layer. And you can see here, it's a lot more choppy. So we're not completing a full line. We are actually kind of breaking up lines, breaking up rings into their kind of constituent lines. So that's kind of an interesting way to kind of break up a design. But one way you could do it as well is you could do it uniformly. So if we check this uniform, this is going to read in, this attribute parse is going to read in every single ring as its own layer. I'm not going to go in depth into what all of this means in this box here, but just understand that this is going to parse it into its own, each line or each ring into its own layer. So let's show that. So here it is. We're just alternating every ring. And these colors are randomly generated. So they won't always look like this. And in fact, they're randomly generated, but specifically to not be the same color as any color in the original file. So there won't be any kind of stroke color collisions. So that's alternating. And if we wanted to, you could bump this up to something crazy like 20. And now you got 20 different colors here, and it's going to just kind of alternate and pick a new one for each one and then loop back onto itself. And then, you could say split it into 20 layers and then remove layers 10 through 15. Now we're missing the layers that are 10 through 15. We're kind of missing these chunks as we go here. And so this is what the update to deCompose allows you to do, is it allows you to do each of these kind of in sequence, where you can separate it into different layers, you can remove some of those layers, and then you can also, if you want to, save those as separate files. So let's show that as well. So we've got 20 layers here. Let's remove 2 through 19. Let's show that real quick. So we should really only have 2 layers. Layer 1 and layer 20, and those are next to each other because as soon as it goes all the way up to 20, it starts counting back at 1. So we've got 2 layers here. And if I click the separate files button here, this will split your SVG into separate files based on the stroke. Now, this parse up here is not using stroke, and what the Platter post-processing deCompose app is going to do in the background is it's going to load this in with a different parse, perform this this splitting into layers, and then it's going to save that as a temporary file. And for instance, for the remove layers step, it's going to reread it using stroke. And same for this. It's going to reread this using stroke if necessary. So the separate layers won't work with show because it's just going to save each one as a separate file. But if I click confirm, we now have 2 separate files here. And we've got a file 1 and a file 20. And those are the layer numbers, if you remember, that we did not delete. We deleted 2 through 19, and we've left with 1 and 20. And so that's what the names of those files are going to be. And so now we have each of those both loaded in Platter post-processing. And so you can do, further post-processing with those 2 layers, or just reselect if you want kind of just one of them. And you can just show here that we've just got that one blue layer. Let's go through the rest of the options that deCompose gives us. I'm just going to close this and we're going to reselect. You can see that it shows files unchanged from deCompose since I exited without doing anything. I'm going to reselect the original file that I had before. And I'm just going to walk through kind of what the remaining options are here. So in deCompose, I give you a box for each of these attribute parse options. This allows you to customize it as necessary. These are defaulted to what I usually use. So I typically want to parse by stroke when I'm sorting lines. I typically want to parse by stroke when I'm removing layers. I typically want to parse by stroke when I'm sorting lines again, or when I'm splitting them into separate files. So it really depends on what you're doing. You can change these around. You can sort by whatever attributes you want. These are just the default values. And, if I show this right now, that will be the two different layers that we had before. And so up here, I give a line sort and a line shuffle option. So why these are interesting is because I like to use deCompose somewhat creatively when I'm separating into layers. If I show you what it looks like when I separate this into this split distance, once again, you can see they're not the best colors. I'm going to reopen deCompose and see if I can get some nicer ones. I should have a button for that. I'll add an issue. Randomize colors to something less nasty. That's the problem with trying to do random colors, is they don't always look nice. All right. These at least are slightly less harsh. So we've got two different layers that this is getting split into. It's reading it as one layer. So this, what was originally this red line here, is just kind of getting lumped into layer 1. And then we've got this as layer 2. So this is the same as what we did before. But if we did a line shuffle, what this is going to do is it's going to change the order of the lines to be random. And so now it's going to be entirely different kinds of groupings of lines here. So now you've got kind of this grouping here and this grouping here. And that's just because each of these rings is getting randomized in the drawing order rather than what it used to be, which was just kind of like from the middle to the outside. And then this one just kind of over the top. So the line shuffle gives you some kind of creative options for doing different kinds of split distance stuff there. But you can also line sort it up front if you want. And that will also give you slightly different results depending on kind of where your seams are. Now, the seams of my closed shapes are here, but if they were different, you might see some different kinds of designs there. So I have a line sort and a line shuffle up here, and then I have a line sort kind of on by default after separating the design into layers, after removing layers. I find it is useful to have this where once you separate it into different design layers to just kind of resort this for drawing order. But that's something you can obviously turn off. And then the line shuffle is just an added kind of, creative output here as well. So deCompose is meant to be rather flexible, but again, it's filled in with all of these default values that make using it very easy. So if you want to do something more complicated with parsing or shuffling lines, you can do that. But otherwise, it's relatively straightforward that you can essentially read it in, sort it if you want to, or shuffle it, separate it into whatever layers you want, remove any layers you want. If you want to sort and shuffle again, you can, and then write it out either as separate files or if you just hit confirm, just as the one file. So if you found this useful, please consider supporting me over on Patreon, and have a great day.